Digital Foundry is sponsored by Backface, the leader in crash and error reporting for game developers. Click on the link in the video description and sign up for your free trial today.
One of the great joys of playing on PS5 and Series X is seeing how last-gen games run on new hardware. New specs that tap into the full potential of game code intended for PS4 and Xbox One. Call of Duty Warzone is an amazing example of this, a game that's yet to see a full-blooded next-gen revision, and so for now runs in a backwards compatibility mode on these newer systems. That is with the caveat that there's a stealth edition of 120Hz support on Xbox Series X and S, which came about without any real announcement from Infinity Ward. Otherwise, this is still Xbox One X code running on Series X, and likewise PS4 Pro code running on PS5. Regardless, the benefits are huge in frame rates, resolution, clarity, and more, thanks to how scalable the engine is at its core. Today then, I set out to find out how much of an upgraded experience Warzone is on Xbox Series X, S and PS5. How much does it fine-tune the last-gen code? Which console looks best? And what of this stealth 120Hz support on Xbox systems? Let's find out. Warzone's been a phenomenon this year, and really for good reason. Infinity Ward's engine delivers a physically accurate 60 FPS, 150 player battle royale on anything from the base Xbox One up to the mightiest top-end PC. And it's thanks to the engine scalability this is possible at all. Technologies like dynamic resolution scaling and intelligent LOD management make all the difference. For anyone playing on PS5 or Series X right now, the result is a big improvement just by virtue of taking advantage of those engine dynamics. To show the upgrade then, I had the full DF squad assemble and capture on a range of machines at the same time. The setup? First off, the optional high resolution mode texture pack is installed on every console. We have one player on Xbox One X here for example, and another on Series X, running at 60Hz each in a squad. Both players die off one way or another, and then each moves to a spectator view of the same enemy player to get matching gameplay. We have perfectly matched footage then, but where is the next gen upgrade? One X versus Series X is a great way to show the advantage. First off, most core settings are identical as you can see, the shadow rendering, the texture quality, even LODs are a match between them. And it makes sense, Series X inherits the same setting profile with some exceptions as the One X code. But Series X does bring benefits into the picture. Texture filtering is bumped right up to 16 times anisotropic filtering to begin with. It's a system level advantage for Back-Compat titles on Series X to get boosted filtering, and here it translates to something tangible. Textures appear clearer, sharper at an angle than One X's lower preset. Also, and maybe it's a byproduct of the improved filtering, but grass draw distances are upgraded on Series X. See how the grass tufts ahead render further afield across the scene? It's purely decorative, it doesn't affect gameplay, but a clear boost over the original One X rendering of the scene. It appears everywhere too. Resolution upgrades then. This is the biggest, most definable plus point for running on Series X. Warzone runs with dynamic res scaling, DRS, on One X, which targets a maximum of 3840 by 2160. That's the goal anyway. The reality is, of course, a bit different. The true native resolution for One X drops on the horizontal axis, up and down according to rendering load, often substantially. So in this case, we have a side-by-side where One X runs at 2112 by 2160, or 55% of a true 4K pixel count. On Series X though, the GPU doubling from a 6 teraflop profile to a 12 teraflop profile gives it power to always render at a proper 3840 by 2160, maxing out the 4K output. The advantage of course varies from scene to scene, but the result here is a sharper end result. You can even see the visual noise on the grills on One X, a screen door effect from that upscale, cleared up on Series X's true 4K. Really impressive stuff. Next up is the performance boosts. Again, it's amazing how much these side-by-sides reveal, even from the very first jump sequence from the plane. In fairness to One X, the dynamic 4K setup means most gameplay is 60 FPS anyway. Still, frame rate drops are possible, dropping to around 50 FPS in this case and 45 FPS at worst, with tearing right at the top. As for gameplay, it's a similar story. Complex cities in Verdansk or woodland spots tend to bring 1x down on the graph, but Series X, not an issue. In fact, the whole graph is a constant 60 FPS no matter where we tried while travelling as a team by SUV. We're all travelling the same path here, and while the view is admittedly a little different, it shows a pretty big 45 FPS drop on 1x. Everything is just cleared to hit a 60Hz target, and it smooths over any and all drops as they come up. This comes up again and again while on foot. Matching the streams in Spectator view gets a more precise test of render load this time. Again, 1x has issues dealing with forest areas. With the toxic gas too, there's small drops, and also scoping across long ranges in Verdansk. These are big GPU bottlenecks that Series X gets to 60 FPS without much trouble. If you're looking for that slight competitive edge while online, Series X delivers in this sense, but again, it's fair to say 1x gets it right most of the time. Combined with the resolution boosts, the better texture filtering, the improved grass draw, it does stack up to something tangible. A lot of these benefits on Series X are residual and stand in contrast to, well, how PS5 is handled. So to recap, PS5 takes on PS4 Pro's visual settings, but by their nature they're more restricted than Xbox One X's. The resolution situation, for example, Pro was set to hit a maximum of 2716 by 1528 and not 4K. As a result, PS5 has no way to push beyond 1528p, despite the GPU increase. The image just can't clear a native 4K because of that legacy coding, though it uses DRS and so peaks at 1528p more often than Pro ever could. So there is an improvement, but compared to Series X, in a match playthrough, it sadly does fall behind in overall image clarity. Again, no reflection on the hardware itself, it's the software that's holding it back from its full potential here, and it's a shame. PS5 also misses out in a few other areas. The better texture filtering on Series X, well, it's not here at all, and it just reverts to the PS4 Pro setting. Also, you'll note the grass draw distance is similar to the last gen versions, a small detail, but Series X has a plus here. There's not a lot more to the comparison though. The high quality texture pack is installed on both, and each run at similar settings otherwise. Also, by virtue of being on more powerful hardware, PS5 locks more tightly to 60 FPS. It's practically flawless, just like Series X. Running through the same stress points as 1x, there's no way to drop it. Mission accomplished on the frame rate side then, but a shame we can't see a full push to 4K on PS5 or the filtering upgrades. Plus, right now, only Series X and S have a 120Hz option added. Speaking on the Series S version, it's a bit of a strange situation. Simply put, Series S inherits the older, weaker 1S settings, and therefore runs with dialed back shadow settings, post-effects quality, and runs at 1080p resolution at best. There's a lot more potential in this version, and as it stands right now, it looks a little rougher than it really should given the power on tap. It of course uses the DRS system of Xbox One, but just maxes out completely at 1080p, and maybe 1440p would have been a better figure to go for here. It'll be interesting to see if proper support for Warzone could transform how it plays on Series S. It's the most in need for sure. Though the advantage here again, as with PS5, is it still pumps out a pure 60fps refresh. The last point to touch on here is the most curious, the 120Hz mode. This was stealthily added by the developer and only came to light after Warzone players let the game run with Series S and X's 120Hz mode toggled in the system menus. It actually works, not brilliantly, it's barely ever even at 120fps in reality, but well enough and certainly above 60fps. It must be said the frame times on this are too variable to enjoy on most TVs, but, and this is a big but, if you have variable refresh rate support on your screen, you're in luck. Running at say 80 to 120fps with VRR enabled gets you a much smoother image than playing at 60fps. More frames per second, and sorting the frame time irregularities makes it a great way to play. Without it, you're better off sticking to 60fps. There is another huge point to 120Hz you'll have noticed already. Frame rates are higher on Series S than Series X. Yes, the weaker machine actually pulls ahead of Series X by anything from 5 to 15 FPS, and the reason why needs some explaining. First, let's talk on the resolution setup here, because it's changed compared to running at 60Hz. Both machines, as we've established, have different resolution targets, a dynamic 1080p on S and dynamic 4K on X, except when each targets a frame rate like 120 FPS and falls short, they fall on the DRS to make up the difference. The result is Series S runs almost constantly at the lower bounds of its resolution range, at 960 by 1080, half of the 60Hz mode. This is then reconstructed to 1080p, but still it's apparent all over these side-by-sides. Foliage appears blurred and subpixel detail gets lost easily at range. Xbox Series X meanwhile does the same thing. It drops to its lowest DRS value of 1920 by 2160, 50% of 4K. It obviously looks much sharper in comparison and has higher settings than S, but still it's a huge drop in clarity over running at 60Hz. Visually, it's a big strike against Series S at 120Hz. I honestly wouldn't advise playing like this. The image suffers just too much. But with that said, it's still very curious to see it pulling ahead of Series X in performance. The side-by-sides say everything. They're similar a lot of the time, often at 90 FPS, but then there are these stretches where S pulls far ahead during action, and it's hard to ignore. Put it down to Series X being perhaps overly ambitious with its resolution target, even at 1920 by 2160, and the visual settings too. This is a last-gen app, and a proper dedicated Series S and X mode which optimizes for 120Hz would make a big difference with new presets. All round, clearly we need a true next-gen Warzone patch to see these new consoles take flight. I mean, look at how Cold War runs at 120Hz on PS5 in multiplayer. It's practically perfect. It's optimized for it with proper resolution boundaries tailored to the specs of the hardware. With the Warzone experience soon to tie into Cold War, ideally that'll extend to all parts of the package. I'd love to see what Infinity Ward do with the engine to get it closer to 120, and have it available at all on PS5. For now though, the Back-Compat support on Series X seems to be a solid boost by default. Again, it falls on the engine's flexibility to make it happen. It's a true native 4K now, has a few visual upgrades, and locks tightly to 60 FPS too, making it an ideal way to play. PS5 is strong enough too, but it does feel underutilized by comparison, thanks to the legacy coding there. Hopefully more to come from these in the coming weeks and months. That's the state of Warzone as it stands then. If you did find this breakdown useful in any way, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.
Don't lose players to game errors and crashes. Instability will happen throughout the game development cycle during playtesting, beta cycles, or after you've released. Backface was developed to automate the capture and analysis of crashes, hangs, and non-fatal errors across PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, PC, Mac, Stadia, and more. Our unique data platform allows you to index anything, integrate with Jira, Slack, Discord, and run analytic workloads to better prioritize and understand your game's stability. Many of the industry's AAA studios depend on Backface. You should too. Click on the link in the video description and sign up for your free trial today.